Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from Washington DC. I'm Nick Harper and these are the top headlines for this hour. Mutual cooperation between India and the other members can make a useful contribution to the post-COVID recovery of the whole world, said India's PM Narendra Modi at the virtual BRICS summit. Germany moves closer to rationing gas as it raises the alert level under an emergency plan after Russia slashes supplies to the country. Travel on Britain's railway system grounds to a halt again amid the second of 3 days of widespread strike action this week, billed as the biggest in decades. The euro and pound retreat against the dollar as economic data points to increased prospects of recession in Europe. Oil prices extend their losses as well. And tragedy averted at the Swimming World Championships in Budapest. An alert coach dives into the water to rescue her swimmer Anita Alvarez after she faints and sinks to the bottom of the pool. Ukraine is all set to enter the European Union after members of the EU Parliament gave Kiev the green light for the bloc's candidacy. Ukraine applied to be a member of the EU days after the Russian invasion in late February, and since then its admission process has moved at record speed.
We vote on the resolution as a whole. The final vote by roll call. The vote is open. Vote is closed, and it is overwhelmingly adopted.
Getting candidate status is the first official step towards becoming an EU member. Earlier this week, France said that there is total consensus amongst the members on Ukraine. But it can still take years for an official admission to actually happen. Well, for more details on this, we're joined by our Brussels correspondent, Rosie Burchard. Rosie, these 27 EU leaders, they don't always agree, do they, on foreign policy issues? So what are the chances that Ukraine is going to get the answer that it's hoping for here?
Nick, you're quite right. There was a yes from the European Parliament, but those lawmakers in the European Parliament don't have the final say. It's purely an advisory vote. It is fully in the hands of the 27 EU leaders who are meeting here in Brussels in this building. They are filing in now. You might see some of them arriving behind me. Now, these 27 leaders are, Nick, so often at odds on foreign policy issues. Often I'll be here at these summits talking about them arguing with different member states, having different opinions. But on this time, according to the diplomats I've been speaking to, they are really all on the same page. We are expecting a resounding rubber stamp to Ukraine's application to become a candidate for EU membership. So it's likely to be a yes, and yes is the answer Kiev was hoping to hear. But that yes will come with strings attached. EU leaders want to see more reforms in Ukraine, reforms to try and curb corruption and also improve rule of law standards. And another caveat, becoming a candidate does not mean becoming a full and formal member. There may still be a long road ahead for Ukraine yet. Kiev, however, very much aware of those caveats and very likely to be welcoming this. This is something Ukraine has been pushing for. Ukrainian President Zelensky says that his country, people in his country have proven they're willing to die for European values and that they deserve a clearer path toward membership of this union.
Rosie, you mentioned there that it's often a long road. So what comes next, and what does this decision actually mean for Ukraine?
Well, it means a big political symbol of solidarity. I've just spoken to Lithuania's President Gitanas Nausėda on his way into these talks, and he's been pushing hard for this. He says it's worth being in politics for all the trouble just to be able to experience what he called happy days like this. So a big, important political symbol for Ukraine, but little in terms of practical changes. Now, becoming a full member of the European Union can take years, if not decades. It will involve some of those reforms I mentioned. North Macedonia, for example, has been a candidate country since 2005, and Albania has been waiting since it was granted its candidate status for around 8 years. And its Prime Minister, Edi Rama, has been at these talks this morning. He criticised in some way, saying, Albania's been waiting a long time. He said it's a positive step for Ukraine, but then he hopes Ukrainian people don't harbour any illusions on what this actually means. It also won't make any real difference in practical terms on the battlefield. Ukrainian President Zelensky says this can be a big morale boost for his soldiers and citizens alike, but he's still going to be lobbying and calling on and asking these EU leaders and NATO leaders when they meet next week to keep up the supply of weapons, particularly heavy weapons, so that Ukrainian forces can keep fending off Russian attacks on the battlefield, as of course that war very much continues on the ground.
Thank you, Rosie. That was Rosie Burchard joining us live from Brussels. Well, next today, the head of the International Energy Agency has warned that Europe needs to prepare immediately for a scenario where Russia stops supplying gas to the continent. Executive Director of the International Energy Agency, Faith Burrell, made the comments to the BBC. This as several European countries say they're receiving significantly less Russian gas than expected. For example, the flow of natural gas through Nord Stream 1 is at 40% capacity. The Italian energy firm Eni said that it received only half of the gas that it was expecting from Russia's Gazprom. Slovakia and Austria have also reported falls, and France says it's received no Russian gas via Germany since the 15th of June. Poland, Bulgaria, Finland, Denmark and the Netherlands have had their Russian gas deliveries suspended after they refused to pay in Russian rubles. Russian officials have denied deliberate wrongdoing and have pinned the blame on technical issues. The IEA chief says he believes the cuts are geared towards preventing Europe from filling its storage, thereby giving Russia more leverage as we head into the winter months. With the war raging in Eastern Europe and tensions with Russia at an all-time high, countries in the EU are now racing to try and fill their storage sites. Germany is hoping to reach 90% of its capacity by November. At present, its stores are only half full. Fears that the United States might be heading towards a recession grew on Wednesday when the US Federal Reserve boss Jerome Powell cautioned that aggressive interest rate hikes meant to cool soaring inflation could eventually trigger a recession. Powell made the comments in testimony before Congress, which was closely watched by both investors and analysts. He also said that the world's largest economy faces an uncertain global environment and could see further inflation surprises.
Do you agree with the perspective that if interest rates go too high, too fast, it could drive us into a recession?
It's certainly a possibility. It's not our intended outcome at all, but it's certainly a possibility. And frankly, the events of the last few months around the world have made it more difficult for us to achieve what we want, which is 2% inflation and still a strong labor market.
Well, this admission comes after the US Central Bank last week sharply increased interest rates and promised more similar moves in order to combat the rising cost of living. The world's most powerful central bank is facing criticism that it was too slow to act to the changing economy, which benefited from a flood of federal government stimulus. While the US economy recovered fairly quickly from the COVID pandemic, transport and supply chain issues in parts of the world remained a challenge. This has fueled inflation, which got dramatically worse after Russia invaded Ukraine in late February. And sanctions were imposed by the West on Moscow, which then sent food and fuel prices soaring. Powell, however, pointed out that inflation has now become a global issue and is not just unique to the United States. Staying with the US, and the district police chief who delayed responding in the Texas school shooting incident has been put on administrative leave. Chief Pete Arredondo was in charge of the law enforcement response in Uvalde on May the 24th. He'll be replaced by Lieutenant Mike Hernandez. The school board superintendent has said that the suspension was ordered based on the ongoing investigation into the police response on the day. 19 students and 2 teachers were killed in that attack. Meanwhile, a day after the Texas Public Safety Director's moving testimony, where he said the police and law enforcement response was an abject failure, the mayor of Uvalde says that McCraw's agenda was motivated and that the testimony was inaccurate.
Colonel McGraw has an agenda, and it's not to present a full report on what happened and to give factual answers to the families of this community. 19 students and 2 teachers tragically died. They were Uvalde children and Uvalde teachers. What matters to Uvalde is that these broken-hearted families and this grieving community get a full investigation and accurate report of what happened that day. The petty infighting, the clickbait headlines, and the politically motivated scapegoating is not helping anyone. It is dividing a community and further frustrating grieving families.
Battery shortages and supply disruptions from China have hit multi-billionaire Elon Musk's Tesla Motors. Musk said that Tesla is losing billions of dollars at its new factories because of supply chain snags. He's one of many auto executives who've said that shortages may further hurt the industry.
Elon Musk says Tesla's new factories in Berlin and Texas are losing billions of dollars. That's due to a shortage of batteries and issues with supplies coming via Chinese ports. Musk made the comments in an interview with a US Tesla owners club. He described the factories as gigantic money furnaces, which make a roaring sound like the noise of money on fire. Musk said the Texas factory only produces a tiny number of cars because of challenges in boosting battery production. He described the Berlin factory as being in a slightly better condition. That's because it uses an older battery technology that is less affected by delays. Musk described the recent lockdown-driven stoppages at the firm's Shanghai plant as very, very difficult. They also hit production in California, which relies on parts from Shanghai. Musk said the last 2 years were an absolute nightmare of supply disruptions, and said the problems weren't done yet.
Moving to South America now, and Ecuador is the latest country to see protests over rising food and fuel prices. The capital, Quito, saw thousands demanding the president's intervention. There's been clashes between the police and between protesters across the country. Here's our report.
Thousands of indigenous people protested on Wednesday in the Ecuador capital city, Quito, demanding the president address the sharp rise in fuel and food prices. The country has been gripped by protests for 10 days. A day before, violence erupted on the streets in the city of Puyo, which lies within the Amazon. Social media footage from Tuesday appeared to show a demonstrator unconscious on the ground next to a device that reportedly made impact with his head. The person lay in a pool of blood. According to human rights groups, the protester was killed after being struck in the head by a police tear gas canister. Police confirmed the death of the protester, but said he had tampered with an explosive device that officers were not using at the scene. Nationwide, 114 police officers have been injured and 104 people detained. That's according to the police. The demonstrations are longer lasting and larger than marches over fuel prices in October last year. The protests are testing President Guillermo Lasso's ability to restart the economy. The indigenous group Kone said on Wednesday afternoon it had sent a letter to Lasso outlining terms demanding a fuel price cut, a halt to expanding oil and mining, and more time for farmer loan repayments.
Thousands of Dutch farmers are rallying against the government on their tractors. Traffic in central Netherlands and around Amsterdam has come to a standstill. Our next report gives you the details.
This is Strooi, a village in the Dutch province of Gelderland in central Netherlands. Thousands of farmers have assembled, protested against the government's far-reaching plans to cut nitrogen emissions. This is one of the largest ever demonstrations by the farmers. They're driving in with their tractors, blowing horns and causing widespread traffic chaos. The Dutch farmers are demanding the scrapping of recently announced plans by the Hague-based government. They believe it could see a 30% reduction in livestock.
I'm here for my future. I see my future falling apart. Not in 10 years, but sooner. And if you get up at 4:15, 7 days a week for your cows, I think they didn't quite get in The Hague. We are not just driving around a tractor.
Netherlands is the world's second largest agricultural exporter. But it is also one of the top greenhouse gas emitters in Europe, especially of nitrogen. And much of this is blamed on cattle-produced manure and fertilizers. But farmers say they are being unfairly targeted as opposed to big businesses and industries. Many are vowing to resist any plans to scale down or close farms.
Nederland heeft nu een heel beleid en zullen eigenlijk de stikstofnormen die gehaald moeten worden.
Well, the Netherlands now has a whole policy, and the nitrogen standards that have to be met are incredibly high compared to other countries. The agricultural sector are the only ones that have to surrender everything. The industry is left out. The Randstad must grow, housing must grow, and agriculture must give way. Our survival is now at stake, so we must make our voices heard today.
The Dutch government plans to cut greenhouse gas nitrogen by as much as 70% by 2030 in 131 key areas. Many of them are close to nature reserves. This means a 40% drop in emissions is expected from farmers. And this could result in around 30% less cattle. The government's announcement comes in the wake of a 2019 ruling by the country's highest administrative court. It accused the Netherlands of not doing enough to protect its natural areas.
It was one statement on October 1st, 2019, and now there's just a policy on the table that they want to push through, and we must not let that happen.
And with this, traffic has come to a standstill for kilometers around the town of Strooi, which falls on the east of Amsterdam. The farmers and their tractors continue to arrive from across the country to protest. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
The PGA Tour has admitted it cannot compete with the unlimited financial wealth of the Saudi Arabia-backed LIV Golf Series. Tour Commissioner Jay Mahanahan has accused the Breakaway League of attempting to buy the sport. Those comments came just after the defection of another high-profile player, Brooks Koepka. Koepka is a four-time major winner and has topped the year-end world rankings twice across a total of 47 weeks as the best-ranked player in the sport. He's also the only player in history to have simultaneously held and defended two major titles, following wins at the 2017 and 2018 US Opens and the 2018 and 2019 PGA Championships. The 32-year-old will join his younger brother Chase in the second event of the Revel Series next week at Pumpkin Ridge Golf Club in Portland. Ironically, Koepka has previously criticised the lack of competition in the 48-man field and termed six-time major winner Phil Mickelson greedy for hobnobbing with the Greg Norman-fronted league.
Am I surprised? Yes, because of what he said previously. I think that's why I'm surprised at a lot of these guys, because they say one thing and then they do another. And I don't understand that, and I don't know if that's for legal reasons or if they can't. I have no idea, but it's pretty duplicitous on their part to say one thing and then do another thing.
You're talking about something you said 2 years ago or a week ago?
The whole way through. Yeah. The whole way through, in public and private, all of it.
The PGA Tour has been rattled by the exodus of players who, between them, have won 9 of the last 22 majors. Phil Mickelson, Sergio Garcia, Graham McDowell and Martin Kramer are perhaps past their prime, but the recent additions are bona fide sports stars of the global game. Dustin Johnson is a former world number 1 who won the Masters as recently as November 2020 and has 24 tour titles to his name. Bryson DeChambeau is one of the sport's most popular stars and played an exhibition money-spinning match with his Bet Noir Kapika in Las Vegas last year.
I was at a function with him last week and definitely wasn't what he had in mind. We were focused on building the PGA Tour and getting the guys that are staying here together and, kind of just having talks and figuring out how we can, help benefit the tour. And so to see Brooks leave was definitely a surprise for us. With that being said, he's made his decision. I'm not going to, knock him for doing that.
The PGA Tour has held discussions with players over the last few days in the build-up to the Travellers' Championship. The Tour has detailed a series of proposals which it hopes will stop the exodus of players. It's committed to reverting back to the pre-2014 format of starting the tour in January instead of the wraparound format currently in use, which sees tournaments begin in September. Prize money is being increased by close to $54 million across 8 marquee tournaments. 3 global tournaments are set to be added to the calendar on the lines of the LIV series, with prize money of $25 million per event. The field will be restricted to the top 50 players from the FedEx Cup rankings. The field size for the playoffs is being adjusted, with just 70 players going through to the first event instead of the 125 previously. Only the top 70 players on the points list will be fully exempt for the next season and the marquee series of tournaments. Players outside of the top 50 can compete in additional events during the full season to retain their tour cards and priority status.
If this is an arms race, and if the only weapons here are dollar bills, the PGA Tour can't compete. The PGA Tour, an American institution, can't compete with a foreign monarchy that is spending billions of dollars in an attempt to buy the game of golf. We welcome good, healthy competition. The LIV Saudi Golf League is not that. It's an irrational threat, one not concerned with the return on investment or true growth of the game.
Well, that's all we have on this edition. We'll be back again, same time tomorrow. See you then. Thanks for watching.
This is right, Arab.